Welcome to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. I'm Angela, and this is.
I'm Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Please remember to follow and subscribe and invite your friends if you like our topics. On the Monday morning segment of the show, Kat and I talk about topics that we find interesting for about 30 minutes. Today's topic: toxic relationships. And as you know, we've got a quote. Kat, take it away.
Okay, this is from, and I'm just going to call him our good friend, even though he doesn't know us, but we love Adam Grant. So he says, in toxic relationships, you're forced to choose between honesty and loyalty. You bite your tongue to protect their ego. In healthy relationships, honesty is an expression of loyalty. You speak your mind to help them grow. When you have real trust and respect, candor shows care.
Ooh. I'm trying to think about how this quote works in some situations because if in a toxic relationship, am I even honest with myself? Am I willing to be honest with other people, let alone the person I'm in the relationship with? And how, if that's the case, how can I'm thinking that's already a sign right there. If I'm and let me just say before we get going real quick, if you're in an abusive relationship, you can text 741-741 and someone will talk to you. I think that's one of the main hotlines for abuse and things like that, and domestic violence. So anyway, go on, Kat. I just thought I'd get that out of the way.
Good. Thank you for sharing that, because maybe somebody who's watching will wonder that. I look at first. I would want to look at why I'm in a relationship with that person. So obviously, for me at least, if it's a romantic relationship or a friendship, why do I have that? Those are the kind of relationships that if they are toxic, you can either change the relationship or you can get out of the relationship. There are others that might be a little bit more difficult, relationships with parents, with children, other relatives, or in work environments. Sometimes you're forced in this relationship. Now, obviously, you can cut off, family members. You could change jobs, but the truth of the matter is, I think we're gonna encounter relationships that have a certain level of toxicity, no matter where we're at. I think the question is, how do we deal with them?
Sometimes I even think, without realizing it, we're part of the toxicity, though, too.
I would agree with that.
If I'll admit, I've had this thought: if only they would just. And yes, I'm admitting that to the public.
I'm on that train with you too, so I'm not going to claim innocence by any stretch of the means. But so we're talking about what we can do, I think, and we can only change ourselves, and we can change insofar as that we can change. And I think if a relationship is toxic, it's very difficult, I think, to change that relationship on your own.
Yeah, I know that it's impossible to. I can do the work I need for myself, but as far as the other person, if one is in a relationship with someone else who is not willing to do the work, then it doesn't matter. And right. I think that's really hard. But the interesting thing is, I don't think it has anything to do with with the person who is doing the work. It's just the other person, for whatever reason, can't do the work.
Right. And it's not a judgment. It's just you know, it takes two to tango in a sense. And so yeah, so if and I think it comes to what is the value of that relationship. Um, and in all honesty, if I don't value a relationship enough to put in the work and the other person doesn't value it enough to put in the work to change that. You know, I'm thinking like a situation where married people might go to marriage counseling because a certain level of toxicity has developed over time is um, because things that came between those two people hadn't worked out. But if
Right.
both partners are not committed to making those changes, the one can do everything that they can do, but it does take two people to work on that relationship. And I like what the quote said about a healthy relationship. He didn't specific, yeah, he did say that. In a healthy
Mm-hmm.
relationship, honesty is an expression of loyalty. You speak your mind to help them grow. When you have real trust and respect, candor shows care. So if you have that, you know, I if I'm starting a relationship with somebody and we have a budding and growing friendship, you for me it's I start to trust them more in the sense that I might reveal things about myself that I'm not going to reveal to just anybody.
Right.
um, and if they keep that confidence, if they don't try to change me in the sense of that, but really just listen and care. And if I ask their opinion, maybe offer their candid opinion.
I think what I hear you saying is, like, for instance, this quote, and I would change it a little bit, but I'll read it as it is. It says the ideal lover is someone who gives you lots of space to just be yourself, but still connects with you as you are. Um, in that, in any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't have the space to be myself, that might be a sign that there's a toxic relationship. If I'm not giving someone else the space to be themselves and I think I need to fix them, again, that might be a sign of a toxic relationship. And I think that that's similar to what Adam Grant is talking about, is like
Mm-hmm.
that honesty. So I can speak my mind, and it's important and it's out of love, but it doesn't have to be the only way.
Right. um, there, I mean, I'm thinking of certain times where people may just need that comfort in the moment. um, and you may think their situation is hopeless or having a difficulty or something like that, but what they need to hear is that it'll be all right. I mean, I'm just trying to think of things where we may not be completely honest in terms of the reality or the facts. But in a sense, let's say you have somebody who's dying of cancer and you're comforting the spouse. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you're telling them it's going to be all right. And in reality, it may be all right in the end. I mean, that's part of life. We have to accept that part of life. And to them, it may not be, well, the person's going to recover. But in a sense, that whole idea of having the faith, that there are other things beyond this that are going to be okay. Yes, it may never be the same if that person passes away of cancer or whatever, but to be able to take that situation and say it will be okay. I mean, it's that kind of thing where it may not be completely honest, but there's a emotional honesty, I think, that you're sharing with the person.
Yeah.
I don't know if
So
if you agree with that or not.
Spoiler alert here. If you intend or want to watch the last episode of 1883, do not watch probably the next couple of minutes here because I'm going to spoil it. Are you okay if I spoil it, Kat? Are you going to
I
watch
don't
it?
watch the show, so it's fine.
So the Elsa, the daughter, gets shot with an arrow that was, we find out, caked in manure, and was shot in the liver, which pretty much guarantees death. But her father lies to her about her impending doom, and it was so much out of love, and she was able to live differently, I think, than had she known that she was going to die. So I think she was able to live maybe a little more freely, or continue with that freedom, than be chained to the idea of death. And in that, so I would have to say, in that situation, it was really a beautiful lie, right? Like, it might have been hurtful to say, oh yeah, well, you're gonna die.
Well, and here the thing is, and I think you'd agree with me on this. There is a spiritual truth to that. So it's yes, the physical act, if we're only looking at ourselves in this life and the pain that she was going to go through, and the suffering that she was going to have with that death. But there was a spiritual thing, like you said, in a sense, it might have freed her. So instead of concentrating on the pain in that, she could concentrate on the other things, the remembrances of her life, the people she's loved. And in that sense, it's a certain, like you said, a merciful kind of lie, but in a sense, it has that universal truth, I believe.
Yeah, that's so hard, because we I don't know, there's these black and white rules in this world sometimes, and I'm not certain everything is as black and white as we think it is, or at least as I used to think it was, that I knew the answer. And now I'm of the belief that I don't. And if I pray and meditate and really try to do the right thing, sometimes the right thing doesn't appear to be what would be the right thing. So lying is also, I think, it's all, isn't it a sin to lie, right? Like, but in some senses, it's also that mercy and grace.
Right. Yes. And I mean, if we've talked about lying before, I mean, sometimes if people are throwing a surprise party for you, you may have to tell the white lie so as not to spoil the surprise. There is something to that. So I don't think the kinds of truths that we live in the day to day are not absolute truths. So if you were to ask me, you were getting dressed and to go somewhere, and you asked me, what do you think of what I'm wearing? Um, I could just say, oh yeah, it's great. But because you and I think we have a pretty honest relationship, I could tell you, Angela, that's not the most flattering thing. It's too short, or whatever. The
Yeah.
coloring isn't right on you, and I was telling but it's ultimately my opinion. And you could take what I'm saying and say, well, I disagree. And I would say, okay. Or you can say, oh, okay, I didn't think of that, or like, what about these shoes? And I'm like, well, you're going here. Are those really the best shoes to wear?
Right. But I also think in our relationship, I could say no. In our friendship, I could be like, yeah, no, I don't agree with you. And you'd be like, okay, yeah, no big. And there
Exactly.
would be no love lost. Whereas I think in the toxic relationship, there might be love lost over that.
Right, exactly. Because the honesty is not welcome. The person wants to be puffed up and be made to feel good. And so their ego, if you're responding to their ego, So where you and I would respond to each other out of love and caring and concern and still respect each other's autonomy and opinion,
Right.
you know, and then let it go. In a toxic relationship, if I said that to somebody who I had a toxic relationship, they'd get all bent out of shape and offended. You know, I know. I remember watching an episode of Modern Family,
Okay.
and if you're familiar with the characters, Gloria is wearing these high-heeled shoes, and they're going to a theme park. I don't know if it was, I think it was Disney, but not important. So she's trying to walk in, and Jay had said, "Well, why don't you change your shoes?" "No, this is what I wear." And of course, walking around a theme park, her feet were killing her after a while. And so she had to wind up wearing these ridiculous slippers because her feet were so bad, these big with a Disney character or something on them. Um, and the point was, if she had just put on some gym shoes or tennis shoes or sneakers, whatever anybody else calls them, um, she would have been comfortable and been able to walk around without any problem. But she had that ego thing going on. Eventually, she gave in because the love was there. But it was just like, no, you couldn't tell her that in the moment because even though it wasn't necessarily a toxic relationship, it was a little bit toxic in that moment because her ego was above listening to the people who loved her.
Well, but again, if that's where the other quote by Nirmala comes in, right? The ideal
Mm-hmm.
lover is someone who gives you lots of space to just be yourself but still connects with you as you are. So like I think a lot of times it is really hard with the people we love when we see them going down a route or something where it's like ouch, and I can see the potential wreck, but I'm also really trying to stay open to the fact that maybe I don't see a potential wreck. maybe it's just the history of my history where I think, oh, it's gonna crash and burn, but that may not be true.
Right. Well, here I'll tell a story a little bit more uh, relevant, I think. So I have a friend who um, staunch anti-vaxxer, and you know we had some discussion about vaccines and what they consisted of and this the safety of them, and nope. And so I had to let that go and say, okay. Well, this friend then caught COVID, became very ill, was in the ICU, and is actually still now recovering in a rehab center. I mean, got incredibly, incredibly ill. And there is a part of me that wants to say, if you would have just listened, if you would have gotten vaccinated, you might not have been that bad. But there's this other part of me that just wants to be loving and caring. And I have to make that conscious decision. Because what is important? It's not loving for me to say, I told you so.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
loving is saying, I'm sorry that you're sick, and
I'm
staying in
struggling.
touch and struggling and being supportive.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my opinion, did the person make a bad choice? Yes. But it's not my place to judge. It's just my place to love the person where they're at.
Yeah, which is easier said, I think, than done a lot of times.
And especially if it's somebody very close to you.
Well, and especially if you believe you have the answer so that they didn't have to suffer or don't have to suffer, because
Right.
I think the hardest thing to do is watch the people we love suffer.
Yes.
Especially in these close relationships of, whether it be an aging parent or a child or a friend or a significant other. The last thing I want to see is that them suffering, because it just breaks my heart and makes and I want to cry. I don't
I
cry.
know.
I'll fix cat.
I know. I'm the big crybaby here.
I don't want to take your role. Yeah.
You're more than welcome to borrow it once in a while. But no, that's exactly it. So and that's where the loving and the honesty gets really hard. Is how do you tell a person, you know, if they even want to hear it? So most of us don't have that ultimately, toxic relationship where we really should just cut it off. But I think we all have levels of toxicity within our relationships with people.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like an aging parent, um, where the caretaker roles are starting to get reversed. How do you deal with that? Realizing that they're still an adult, but you as their child love them and want them to take care of themselves, and you want to make sure that they can do that. So how do you balance that need of giving them their autonomy as an adult, but being in a loving way, offering them the help that they may need?
Gosh, it sounds like an elderly parent is almost like having a teenage or a 20-year-old, like a kid in their 20s. How do you allow them that room and still love? I
Right.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. I can only imagine with teenagers. I mean, I knew how I was as a teenager.
I
And
jokingly said the other day, I'm sorry you said that real quick. I'm cutting you off here.
oh, go ahead.
You know, I'm not surprised my mom wanted us all out of the house. As my kids are in their late teens, early 20s, I'm like, well, that would have been way easier to be part of that journey. And I just kind of chuckled. And Mom, I love you. If you're watching, I know you watch a lot of these. And I actually totally understand now. It would have been really hard to that stumbling around that happens in the early 20s. We think the teen years are hard, but I'm beginning to wonder if it, a lot of times kids go off to college, they're not around their parents, they don't, the parents don't see that. But man, there are so many choices and so much going on with at that age.
Oh yeah.
And I would think
Uh,
as an aging adult, like what, on the other end of the spectrum, now there's these concerns about loss of freedom. Over here, it's the breaking out, and over there, it's like the loss of freedom and needing um, the happiness or the freedom to be.
yes.
You know,
And yeah, no, it's just really hard. But what I was going to say is I remember when I was a teenager and young adult and all the stupid things I did.
I'm surprised our parents still love us.
And, well,
Man, do we put them through hell?
you know, and they don't even know the half of it, which is part of the thing, you know, that I survived that. But here the thing is that we as the adults here, and having that, that autonomy to do that, it's so hard to let them be. I can only imagine what it would be like to be a parent, to have a parent of a teenager or a young adult, where they could just say, screw you, I'm leaving,
Yeah.
and then go off. And I know the instinct is to say, I want to still take care of you. I want to make sure that I'm there to guide you and help you make those choices.
Yeah. Or
And
the other part of it could be, well, fine, go.
well, yeah,
I
but the
love you.
real the real loving part, yes, you know, well, here, how do you find that middle ground between go and I'm here for you? And I
Well,
think
I think,
that's the hard thing is, do our children, do our parents have that trust in us to respect the choices that they make,
yeah,
but still be able to be there for them,
yeah.
so that uh, parents don't feel like they have to hide things from their children,
And
about their
children don't think
health
they
and
have
their
to
finances.
hide things from their parents. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Because in reality, the reality is what can we do if a child is 20 years old and they want to go out, gallivanting on the streets. And God, I'm showing my age with that phrase, but you know thank you. um, they're going to do it anyway.
yeah.
And how do you deal with that? um
I,
and
th- I, yeah. I think the only way is love,
exactly.
and finding the balance. What's the loving thing to do as a parent, and what's showing love to the person that I'm, whether it's an aging parent or a young, or a young adult.
Hmm.
How do I, how does one find that balance, and how does one not turn it into a toxic situation? Because I
Right.
think either of those could easily go toxic.
Very, very easily. And I think that's where the obviously love is the overarching thing, but it has to be that kind of love that is there, that's offered, whether or not it's taken. You can't force that love on somebody. Like with my friend, I love you, get the vaccine. you know
Right. Yeah.
um or the child that wants to go into a relationship that's probably not the best for them, because you see signs that they may not see because they don't have that life experience. So they may just have to take that and just say, go. I remember when I was in my 20s, um, someone I knew met somebody and fell in love, and within like 2 weeks wanted to get married. And it was just like, whoa, 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 stop, wait a minute, put the brakes on that.
Hmm.
And they listened to their parent and rethought it. But uh, it was just like the lights went off. It was just crazy. And why would you do this so soon without really knowing the person? But they didn't have that life experience that we
Right.
have at our age. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to live through it to get that, and maybe help steer them in the right direction by giving them that love and asking them the questions. Well, did you think about this?
Yeah. Just giving them
I,
to be who they are.
yeah, and that's the hard. It's almost like walking a tightrope.
Mm. Hmm.
You know, you go on one side, you're controlling and fall off, and you go on the other side, and you're um, where you're not being loving, and they are thinking they're lost and they don't have their support system,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so they're just going to move
Which
forward.
is even worse,
Yeah.
I think, because if you feel like you've lost your support system, that is not that's a desperate place to be. And decisions when we're desperate, I think, are just not good.
And they could lead to toxic decisions. Because
Very more so, right? Even more
yeah,
so than could potentially happen.
I mean,
Well, any last words for the
oh,
audience today,
I,
Kat?
I I always have one more word, but can I have one more thought here about
Yeah.
the thing? How many children got involved in a relationship with somebody because their parents forbade it?
Ooh, probably every single one.
and then it was and then it was toxic, and
Yeah.
wound up in divorce or whatever. um and I'm not saying parents are necessarily right, because I know of some that were okay because they were made on the right decisions based on love and respect and kindness and the
Yeah.
healthy relationship that Adam had talked about, the healthiness that Nirmala talked about love. And so just move forward in love.
Perfect way to end the show. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who have overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
We'll see you next week.